Hey everybody, thank you for joining me again this week. I've been away for a while just because I've been working on different things at work, but got a lot of stuff going on right now. You can see some of it probably blurrily along here, but I'm not going to show you that just yet. I've got some more videos coming the next couple of weeks about finishing old projects, starting new ones, working on Kill Team stuff. But today, what I wanted to do is show you the first attempt I've ever made at making Kill Team terrain. Really ugly, gross, disgusting, which is what I was going for, something sort of chaos cultisty or orky. And I'm going to run you through the process to show you the stats for the different parts of the building. And basically what I'll do is give you an idea of how to build something like this on your own and how you can use paint to make things look like materials that you might see on a site like this one.
The original inspiration for this came from a couple of coffee pots that I had lying around just from different companies and stuff that we ordered things from. So I got a couple of them together, spray painted them white just so I could get a good prime level on them and paint over the top. I grabbed some foam board as well, just to give me something to build a base on. So I set about setting up the coffee pots to get them to look the way I wanted to, like they'd been damaged, shot at, as if these were industrial tanks that had just been caught in the middle of some sort of battle and then used to create a defensive position. So you'll see in a minute how I started to put that together. Once I cut a large couple of strips off the foam board, I started to slice it up, and obviously I built the base part first, which I'm going to shape and change now that I've finished the unit altogether. But I got loads and loads of little pieces that would be about concrete slab size, or I suppose you would say plascrete if it was 40k, I suppose. And then I got my measuring unit, or the measuring stick, or whatever you want to call it, from the box game of Kill Team, and measured to make sure that this was the right height off the base to make sure that it would be sort of compliant with the rules. Basically what I did then was run it around the outside with super glue, attach a whole load of those little slabs, and then I ended up with something like this, and then added even thinner slabs to make steps, because I'll show you at the end. I wanted to come up with some homebrew rules to make different places on this base more accessible or less accessible depending on which angle you're approaching them from. So I had everything laid out, like these plascrete or concrete slabs around the outside, as if someone had hastily sort of turned it into somewhere that they could snipe from, shoot from, or hide on top of, basically. Then over the top, I decided I would create somewhere you could run across. So if we had two different objectives, you could claim them both by running backwards and forwards. And then I used some cotton swabs so I could create these horrible, grimy looking sort of struts that had been hastily rammed in place to create just support structures, and then little bits of rebar sticking out like you can see. And I also knew that using these cotton swabs would let me use technical paint with some texture and stuff like that, so that I could add some really horrible weld marks, some really horrible concrete bindings and stuff like that, and it was onto the paint. Paint was really simple, just some deep sort of earthy red and some neutral kind of green, so I could create contrasting colors between each one. I ended up with a fairly nice effect to start with, nice even color, which was surprising because these are quite large areas to paint with Citadel colors. Then moved on to probably the most complicated part, which is coming up with a color recipe to use for the concrete. I started with brown, then I layered up with black, grey, more brown, and different layers upon layers upon layers. I will put the recipe on screen of all the different colors I use, just so you can get an idea if you want to try and create this concrete effect. You'll see at the end how well it turns out, but just in case you want to recreate it yourself, I've put the different colors on the screen for you to see. It was quite worrying doing the layering at the time because I wasn't really sure if the colors would work out. I just had to have faith in the fact that I knew which colors should work for concrete. I just had to get through the fact that they didn't really look like it until quite late on in the process. You can also see there that I used some old cables and bits of audio equipment just to build some cabling and random sort of machine MacGuffin stuff to sort of bulk out one corner and make it look a little bit more like it was an industrial setup or an industrial area that had been invaded basically by whoever it is that happens to be fighting on the board at the time. Then when I was shading, I also made sure to get some nice horrible corrosion and rust effect by letting the shade paint run down the outside of the tanks. It became much more obvious later on when I had even more rust and dust and dirt effects, and then I started adding this sort of harmful chemicals that would have been stored inside these units. I made them run down and leak down as if the bullet holes or the shell holes in the sides of the tanks had made the stuff run out from inside and create these harmful chemical spills. But then I went on back to the cabling. All the stuff kind of looked like plastic and rubber basically, because that's what it was. So I wanted to make it look a bit more metallic, a bit more as if it was part of something that had either been tacked onto the side by whoever's invaded this area, or if it was part of the original machine and you can't really tell where the actual part of it starts and the cultist or the orc part of the edits begin. So a lot of metallic paint and stuff involved in that. And then it was on to using the concrete effect, technical paint, which I'll put on screen as well. Really impressed with how this worked out. It was quite worrying at the time because it was really darkly contrasted, but I hadn't finished with the concrete colors yet because I wanted it to blend with that effect paint. And you can see it really well here above those cables, how that looks like whoever's built this has used concrete to just paste these panels on in addition to the rebar. And I think I'm quite proud of the effect that it turned out with in the end. But then with some more sort of horrible chemical colors added, I went with another contrast, so green and purple, to go against the green and red of the tanks. I started to then add some transfers just to make this look a little bit more industrial, a little bit more realistic. There are some transfers on it that make it look official, and there are also some other transfers that make it look like cultists or orcs have taken over and added their own little symbols and their own sort of allegiance marks and stuff like that as well. And then the final thing was to add some Tesseract glow just to bring out the real horrible chemical colors and a little bit of like that radiated unpleasantness from around the rim of the tank, which I think turned out quite well in the end because I was worried that it wouldn't glow or show quite so nicely. But ultimately I'm quite happy. You can see here that the concrete effect really did pay off in the end, and it looks grimy, dirty and stony, like there's a lot of grit going on. Then the contrast of those chemical colors comes out really well. And it ultimately creates quite just a little bit of atmosphere for your board whenever you're playing on top. You've got two basically objective points here connected by a little bridge. There's plenty of rebar, dirty sort of concrete effects, horrible welding, rust and stuff like that. So I'm quite proud of all the different sort of effects that I have going on here with the corrosion and stuff as well, and the rebar sticking out. And whenever we did play it, it was quite fun to use the different levels and run across the dirt base, which is basically just coffee grounds. There's still some more stuff I would like to do with this, but as a terrain piece, it does work, and we've played on it, and it functions for now. So I'm excited to do a little bit of editing, but ultimately this does go together quite well. So yeah, if you want to make your own sort of board like this, I just needed 2 coffee tins, some foam board, artist's foam board, old cables, bits and pieces of just tech there that you've got from musical equipment. There's some cotton buds in there, or cotton swabs, whatever you want to call them, just some coffee on the ground there with some glue underneath it basically. I'm going to cut around the base and add some more cabling, but for the most part I like the concrete effect, I like the metal effects, and I like the chemical effects. So ultimately it's a pretty good piece, I think, and it does work really well. So in terms of the rules, this does play quite well. I wanted it to be different depending on where you approached it. So if you're using ladders, it's just 1 circle or 2 inches to move up. That's all it costs. But if you're climbing at a normal point where there's no ladder, it's the same as normal climbing rules. You also got places where you can do both. So you can use an entire normal move to get from the bottom to the top if you're in the right position. But otherwise, everything plays quite normally, moving around the outside, moving up to the top. And we did use some objective markers up above too. I'm quite happy with how this turned out. A lot of fun to play on. If you want a similar sort of design, I can take more photos and show you, but otherwise, have fun playing with this kind of thing and be creative with it.